Okay.
That's all I want to do.
All right.
And yeah.
All right, let's bring the jurors in.
All right, for the jury.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the second phase of this trial. Each party will have a chance to give you their opening statements for this phase of the trial if they choose to do so. State, are you prepared to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed.
We'll waive our opening.
All right, defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I want to thank you all very much. Obviously, at this point, it's clear that there are some things that we disagree about. That's okay. It's also clear that there are some things we do agree about. And I'm glad to be on that same page with you as we proceed forward. We're here to decide the appropriate punishment. And that's an extremely difficult decision. That might be the most difficult part of any homicide case. The state is going to tell you about Mr. McIntyre's past criminal history and about things that were going on while this case that you all have heard was developing. You're going to hear about Mr. McIntyre's pending case for a murder charge in Fort Worth, where he was found guilty, and he was punished for it as an accessory to the crime, as a party, not as the man who pulled the trigger, not as someone who was the direct and proximate cause of someone else's death, but as a participant in that criminal activity, much like you were charged on the law of parties in this case. You're going to hear evidence that Mr. McIntyre was on bond for that case when that happened. You're also going to hear evidence that Tamor McIntyre was 16 years old when this happened. He was a child. You're going to hear evidence that Tamor's childhood up to that point was far from idyllic. He was in the foster system with his sister. He was brought back to live with his father, who was extremely physically abusive to him, breaking bones, breaking ribs. He had to run away and go live with his sister in Corpus. You're going to hear about how that affects him and how it impacts his judgments. And we need to always remember as we go through the evidence in this portion of the trial that we are looking at this whole circumstance through the eyes of a 16-year-old boy who has had a traumatic and horrible life and whose judgment was impaired. You heard testimony in the guilt-innocence phase about the fact that Mr. McIntyre had consumed LSD the night before. And while a lot of time had passed before the incident that you all considered in guilt-innocence took place, we have to acknowledge that there are impacts on his perception of this situation. Now, we talked in jury selection. Intoxication is not an excuse. Intoxication is not a reason why someone should not be held criminally responsible. But it is absolutely something that you all should be considering when you're deciding what is the appropriate punishment. The punishment range for first-degree murder in Texas is anywhere from 5 to 99 years or life in prison. And that's a huge range of time. And we understand, I think, that not all murders are created equal. While we go through this, I ask that you all have some patience with me and bear with me. Because while I know that we all agree on one central thing, which is that there was not enough evidence to convict Mr. McIntyre of capital murder, there was not enough evidence that Mr. McIntyre robbed anyone, we certainly have differences of opinion about different aspects of this case, which I'm going to do my very best to respect. But I don't know exactly why each of you made the decision that you made in the guilt-innocence phase. Some of you may have made it for different reasons. You only need to be unanimous about the ultimate conclusion. So there are things that I'm going to talk about that you may think, well, that's him talking about self-defense, and I've already heard that, and I don't believe it's self-defense, and come on, stop talking about self-defense. But remember, just because someone isn't 100% in the right doesn't mean the other person isn't partially in the wrong. And we have to acknowledge that every human interaction is a two-sided coin, and that there are aspects about Mr. McIntyre's perception on the world, his understanding of what was going on, the events that led up to being in that car with Mark, that have bearing on how responsible he should truly be in the grand scheme of things. Those are things that I ask you all to still consider, even though, I gather, you all have rejected the idea that what was done was justifiable by self-defense or otherwise. Keep those things in mind. Also keep in consideration things that relate to how Joanna behaved in all of this. While I understand that you all found Joanna credible enough to accept her testimony for the purposes of overcoming the accomplice witness rule, and I can understand y'all's reasoning there, please also understand that there are significant reasons why we should be suspect of Ms. Reyes' testimony, and those reasons have additional bearing into how you should make the decision to punish. Remember, Mr. McIntyre was 16 years old when this happened, but Ms. Reyes was 19 years old. Jeremiah was 19 years old. Mark was older than him. Jalen was the closest in age, but still older than him. Tamor is the youngest person in that car. And Tamor is now here in front of you, asking you all to decide how to punish him for this horrible, tragic thing. And keeping that aspect in mind, the motives of the other people, why things were done the way they were, all should be brought to bear, right? The fact that his presumption of innocence has ended does not mean that you all cannot continue to give some credence to the fact that Mr. McIntyre is, like all of you, a human being, and he deserves to have dignity in the way that his punishment is considered. And I want you all to think about some things that are surrounding the circumstances of this case. Because what we're here to talk about is not going to bring Mark back. It is not going to right any of the wrongs that you all have passed judgment about guilt and innocence on. Those things are not fixable. No matter what we were to do, we can't take back time, we can't take back these decisions. We are all having to move forward. And I would submit to you that the criminal justice system and the way that we handle the carceral punishment of people, locking people away, is just one idea out of many in how we address these otherwise unsolvable problems. It is good for the human heart, it's cathartic to try and see that someone is being punished for what they've done. And I understand that. And there's nothing wrong with that desire that we all feel, we all experience, when we have identified that someone has done something that offends the values of society and that puts us in danger. And I respect that. But we have to also understand that it doesn't do any good to solve one wrong by committing another. And I would submit to you that because you will be asked to consider a wide range of punishment, that I would expect that what will be sought from the state of Texas on your behalf as the punishment will be an exceedingly long term of years. To remember that there might be other ways to address problems in society than warehousing human beings. James Joyce, the Irish author, once famously said that Ireland was like a sow that ate her own piglets. And I worry sometimes that in America, that's what we have. We have children who are trapped in the foster system, children who are the victims of abusive parents, of parents with substance abuse problems, children who don't have any chance of having a proper moral compass, a proper guiding system. They have to figure those things out for their own. And unfortunately, they have to do that by trying to live in an adult world as a child. That's a pretty impossible ask. And yet we do it. And we arrest them. And we certify them as adults. And we take them to trial. And we send them to prison for the rest of their life. And the world just keeps on turning. And folks, I just don't see that as being a sustainable model. It doesn't make anything better. It doesn't make anyone better. A little kindness, a little compassion, even in the face of something that we can all agree is evil, wrong, not acceptable, is always the better road to take. At the end of this, you'll all be asked to make that decision. We can't walk it for you. It's going to be personal to each and every one of you. All we ask is that you hear the evidence, that you understand we're not trying to paint this boy as a saint, and I'm not asking you to forgive him for what he did. I'm just asking you to keep it all in perspective and understand that while it's easy to say, you did something evil, we're going to throw you away, that as the prosecutor said in her closing argument, that if Tamor treated this boy as a piece of trash, then the implication should be that you should treat him as a piece of trash. Isn't always the answer. Yes, the Bible talks about eye for an eye, but that's the Old Testament. And there is good news, and it's to turn the other cheek. I'd ask you all to keep these things in your mind as you hear the evidence. I thank you all for your deliberation and your patience with us up to this point.
All right, State, call your first witness.